Chapter 7. The Need for Community. Humans are by nature community animals. Aristotle. We are a social species. We have a great need for connection and are at our best when we connect well with each other. Modern society, however, often works against this need and separates us from each other. It makes us believe that we are separate entities and that success is achieved through independence. This has been a recurring theme throughout this book. We separate children from their parents and build an economic system based on competition and scarcity. In this chapter, we will look in more detail at just how separate we are in modern society and why this is not beneficial to us. We really need social connection. I propose community living as a way to nourish compassion, close personal relationships, and fulfill our social needs. The atomization of society. It seems that in today's world, we are less and less connected. As one author remarks, we've been all the way to the moon and back, but we have trouble crossing the street to meet the new neighbor. Political scientist Francis Fukuyama talks about the great disruption of our social values. We are living less in small communities where everyone knows one another. With the advent of industrialization, urbanization, globalization, and modern information and communication technology, we have become more and more part of a large, impersonal networks. Much of our daily interactions are with people whom we do not know, do not have any close relationships with, or with online services on the rise, with people we cannot even see. Norberg Hodge writes, "In the traditional economy, you knew that you had to depend on other people, and you took care of them. But in the new economic system, the distance between people has increased so that it now appears that you no longer need one another." In this paragraph, we will try to get a deeper understanding of this tendency and its origin. Afterwards, we will have a look at some numbers that are indicative for this trend. We could say Western society has been atomized. One of the fundamental beliefs, or our modern culture, seems to be that we are all separate selves. The story of modernity is a story of separation. To use the words of philosopher Charles Eisenstein, we are all discrete entities, rather than an interconnected, organic whole. And if we are all separate, all we can do is compete and run after our own interests. This explains our preoccupation with competition and selfishness, discussed in Chapter 5. Modern Western society is very individualistic. Individualism has deep roots in our cultural history. Emilia Durkheim, one of the founding fathers of sociology, already spoke more than a century ago of a cult of individual in modern society. Research in cross-culture psychology confirms the individualistic bias of the West. Individualism is at the core of our modern institutions of capitalism and the nation-state. As French diplomat and historian Alexis de Tocqueville already noted in the mid-19th century. In Chapter 6, we discussed how our economic system separates and objectifies us. Look, for instance, at social contract theory, one of the founding philosophies of our modern states. Social contract theory, famously postulated by Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, assumes we are all self-interested individuals. We give up part of our freedom to listen to a higher, political or legal, authority, only because that serves our own well-being, eventually. For if there would be no laws, there would be chaos and conflict, and that would not benefit anyone. Hobbes writes, The natural state of men before they entered into society was a mere war of all men against all men. According to Locke and Hobbes, we are clearly all very separate. Why else would we need a contract so we can live together? Recent research shows with clear numbers how individualistic tendencies are increasing and our community fabric is falling apart. Political scientist Robert Putnam showed in his seminal work, Bowling Alone, how membership of social organizations in the US has declined since the second half of the last century. Over the past 20 years, there has been a steady decline in social engagement and an increase in social isolation in the US. The time Americans spent alone each day in 2019 was 24 minutes longer than in 2003. They spend less time with their neighbors and trust less that people try to be fair. More than 1 in 10 people in the EU meet up with friends less than once a month, and 15% meet their relatives less than once a month. A study done in the UK indicated that 18% of adults always or often feel lonely, prompting the UK government to appoint a minister for loneliness. In the US, about half of the population reports feeling lonely, and young adults seem to be most affected. Just as recently as 2023, the US Surgeon General issued an advisory on our epidemic of loneliness and isolation. Some studies show antisocial behavior increases from the countryside to towns to bigger cities. Sociologists already remarked more than a century ago how people in cities are more distant and indifferent. City dwellers are less likely to trust and help strangers. They are also less inclined to make eye contact and start a conversation. Again, we can refer to Helena Norberg-Hodges' study of development in Ladakh. She observed how the urbanization in Ladakh started to tear apart community fabric. Meanwhile, urbanization is rapidly increasing across the globe, with already more than half of the world's population living in cities today, and this is expected to rise to 2/3 by 2050. As large parts of the world are more and more drawn towards Western values, surveys now show individualism is on the rise across the globe. Trust in other people has declined worldwide in the past 20 years. Household size is shrinking globally, and single-person households are already the norm in Europe and North America. The situation of elderly people here is especially precarious, and I will devote a separate paragraph to this. Elders on the outside. As life expectancy continues to grow worldwide, the number of elderly people in the world grows, and as birth rates continue to decline, the elderly constitute a large and larger part of the total population. Currently, 9% of the world population is over 65 years old. By 2050, this is estimated to be 16%. People are growing older, yet they do not experience the old age in better health than their parents. Access to adequate long-term care is limited even in high-income countries. Neglect of the elderly is a widespread problem. The World Health Organization estimates that at least 1 out of 6 people over 60 living in community settings experience abuse. 2 out of 3 elderly care staff admit to abusing elderly people living in institutions. Older people are living alone more than ever. In fact, they are so isolated, it is shocking to people from other cultures. In Western families, children move out of the house and establish their own household once they are old enough. Different generations do not commonly live together, which is quite unusual from an anthropological perspective. Families are growing smaller, and women participate more actively in the workforce, which makes it more difficult to take care of aging parents. there seems to be less respect and responsibility for elderly. Elderly people, therefore, are at an increased risk of loneliness and depression. Some studies indicate almost 40% of aged people feel lonely, which can have a detrimental effect on their health and general well-being. In response to this, some countries have even introduced legislation to force children to visit and support their aging parents. There is a widespread discrimination and prejudice against older people in many cultures. This ageism may well be as pervasive as other forms of discrimination, such as racism and sexism. Older people are often sidelined in society. Western society glorifies youth and looks down upon old age. Sociologist Donald Cowgill writes, "We associate old age with loss of usefulness, decrepitude, illness, senility, poverty, loss of sexuality, sterility, and death." Older people have a lot to contribute, yet communities fail to include them and draw out their full potential. The elder are often considered to be a burden, yet research shows that investing in their health and well-being pays off. The contributions they make to society outweigh the costs they impose. Social animals. In the previous chapters, we already had a closer look at some of our social instincts. We saw how children need their parents and how we are at our best when we collaborate and give to each other. It seems that we are deeply connected to each other. We need each other to thrive and survive. This is also what all the major religious traditions of the world have been teaching us for centuries. We inter-are, to use the word of Vietnamese Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh. In chapter 5, we already had a look at some of the science that shows our basic altruistic and cooperative nature. In this paragraph, we will dig a little deeper into the social science and look at some exciting new research that is starting to demonstrate our basic social nature. We will continue with some scientific arguments that show it may be better for us to live in community. Social science. Scientists from different fields are now coming to see how our social instincts are deeply ingrained into our psychological, neurological, and biological makeup. Across different fields of study, new scientific approaches are emerging, such as relationship science, social neuroscience, social neuroendocrinology, and interpersonal neurobiology. They all seem to confirm that our need for connection drives much of our behavior. Social relationships are part of what makes us who we are and are key to both our success as a species and our individual well-being. Failure to meet our social needs can have a devastating effect. Social pain is processed in the brain much in the same way as physical pain. Loneliness has a negative effect on our emotional and physical well-being and distorts our social relationships. It obstructs our immune functioning and increases our risk for high blood pressure, inflammation, depression, suicide, and dementia. Loneliness is estimated to be worse for your health than smoking 15 cigarettes per day. Some authors claim increased individualism has led to a rise in depression and mental disorders because in an individualized society, there is pressure on people to find their way all by themselves. Community wisdom. In my opinion, it is part of our genetic expectation to be part of small communities with strong social ties. As mentioned before, the human species has lived most of its existence in small bands of independent hunter-gatherers. Only after the agricultural revolution, some 10,000 years ago did we start to organize ourselves in larger structures. Sociological and anthropological research has suggested that up to 150 people is a natural size for a community. 150 seems to be the number of people that we can have a genuine social relationships with. It is the maximum group size where we can not only keep track of our own relationships, but also the relationships that other members have with one another, which is essential for successful community building. If the group size exceeds this number, social control and peer pressure can no longer guarantee the cooperative behavior of community members, and hierarchies must be installed to maintain social order. This community size has been found not only in hunter-gatherer societies and the earliest agricultural settlements, but also in groups as diverse as spiritual sects and army platoons. It also happens to be the number of offsprings of an average prehistoric great-great-grandmother. These are all the relatives that your grandparents have personally known and can be sure of they are related to. I believe, therefore, that being part of close-knit communities will meet our social needs. One community specialist writes, "Community is in our DNA. We need one another, plain and simple. Community shapes our identity and quenches our thirst for belonging. It has the capacity to improve our physical, mental, and economic health, as well as our overall sense of happiness and fulfillment. It has the power to unite us all in the common bond as we work together for a better world." Community here means a relatively small group of people who interact frequently and know and care for each other. Community can take many forms, which can be residential or not, on or offline. People can come together around common interest, or because they happen to live in the same area. Community gives us a sense of belonging. Without a sense of belonging, it is hard to feel truly fulfilled. Psychologists say it is one of the major bases for self-definition. This sense of community has been defined as a feeling that members have of belonging, a feeling that members matter to one another and to the group, and a shared faith that members' needs will be met through their commitment to be together. The care of community. So, it seems we are social beings in need of community. I would like to talk a bit more about my vision for community. What are the benefits of community life? And how can it help overcome the atomization of our society? More specifically, I would like to talk about intentional communities. These communities are residential communities where people choose to live together based on a set of shared values, often ecological, ethical, or spiritual. I am part of the intentional community of Oroville and have started a small community myself, Sadhana Forest. In the process, I have visited communities all over the world. Much has already been said about community life, but I would like to highlight a few things based on my own experience. Small is beautiful. Society today is structured in such a way that it can hardly meet our social needs. We are governed by cities, states, and countries, which try to take care of thousands or millions of people at the same time. They cannot possibly take everyone's needs into account. We hardly have any personal connection with the people who rule over us. Today, we suffer from an almost universal idolatry of gigantism. It is therefore necessary to insist on the virtues of smallness, writes E.F. Schumcher, a famous proponent of small-scale solutions in society. We cannot expect governments to meet all our needs, and especially not our need for social well-being. Governments do have their role to play. E.F. Schumcher continues, "For his different purposes, man needs many different structures, both small ones and large ones. So I believe our lives will be more fulfilling if we live together in small groups. In intentional communities, we have more agency over many aspects of our life. In society, governments look after our healthcare, education, safety, security, etc. We outsource the care for the environment we live in to professional politicians. Living in intentional community means taking matters into our own hands. Building a community, we consciously craft the way we live, take care of ourselves, and relate to those around us. We try to carve out a small ecological niche where we will experience a sense of ownership over our lives. We stop going with the masses and find or construct communities in order to better address our needs and reflect our vision. I would love to see a world where there is an abundance of intentional communities and people could freely choose the one they want to live in. Or, if they cannot find one that really resonates with them, they should be encouraged to start their own community, just like I did. In this way, people would be able to choose the environment they want to live in and which they believe suits them best. In our current world of nation states, we do not have that option. We are born into a certain country and we have to follow the laws and rules of that country. We cannot choose the country we are born into, and it is not so easy to change our nationality. Even though national governments have their function, if we have lots of communities, we would have more freedom to live a life that is really our own and is beneficial to us. The aspect of choice is important here. If we are not free to choose our own community, the community that we are a part of can become oppressive. Traditional extended families, for instance, can be quite restrictive and demanding and not suit everyone's needs, even though they do involve communal living. It takes a village. One of the most important aspects of community life for me is living together with people of all generations. I think this is part of our genetic expectation. Modern society can be quite adjacent and split us into age groups. We spend large parts of our lives in institutions. Babies go to nurseries, toddlers to kindergarten, children to primary school, adolescents to secondary and high school. Throughout school, they are split up by birth year. Young adults go to college and adults go to work. Elder people retire, sometimes end up in elderly homes, and are often sidelined in our society, as discussed earlier. Allow me to tell a short story. In 1998, my wife and I spent a few months in a remote mountain village in Nepal. Life was very different there. All generations lived closely together. Our neighbor in the village used to bring his elderly mother to her native village every week. He carried her in a basket on his back, walking for 14 kilometers over mountainous terrain, so she could go and pray in her ancestral temple. The whole trip would take him almost an entire day. What an abundance must this old lady have experienced? Which senior in the West today knows such care and commitment from their children? I believe there are many benefits to living together with all ages, and I think it is possible even in today's society. In fact, in the wake of the economic crisis of 2008, the number of multi-generational households seem to have been rising, as young adults are leaving the nest later and later. If we live together with all generations, We can learn from the playfulness and the curiosity of children and from the experience of elders. Looking after the younger and elder will nourish our capacity to care for others. In Sadhana Forest, for instance, many of our younger volunteers do not have children of their own. This is often the first time they live together with small children, apart from their own siblings. It is not always easy for them to deal with children, but it is a great learning opportunity. Young and old can also contribute to the community if they are not separated from it. In the Nepali village, it was common to see children help with household chores and even taking care of younger children. Research shows that children in non-industrialized societies regularly help out in this way, contrary to their Western peers who show much more self-centered behavior. Furthermore, children can enjoy and benefit from the presence of elders, and vice versa. It is an opportunity for children to learn about life, and for the elders, it is a great and reinvigorating way to connect. Another thing that struck me in the Nepali village was that, with all ages living closely together, life's turning points were very visible. Birth, sickness, old age, and death happened pretty much in front of everyone's eyes. Women gave birth at home, and the other women in the village would come and attend. In our society, birth happens mostly in hospitals, as discussed in Chapter 1. Similarly, sickness and death are often dealt with in hospitals. In the past, people used to die at home, surrounded by family and friends. Now death has, just like birth, become a medical event. Many of my friends have never seen anyone die. We are afraid of death. Over time, death has increasingly become a taboo in Western society. In my opinion, it is natural for us to witness birth, sickness, and death in a familiar environment. In this way, we can come to accept them as natural parts of the life course. When we try to hide these events, we are easily thrown off balance when they do happen, and we might not know how to deal with them in a graceful way. Moreover, it seems equally important to me that we experience these disisa life events while being supported by the wider community. When these things happen behind closed doors, they become more difficult to bear. Living in a multi-generational community setting also changes the way in which children are raised. In the village, it involves pretty much the entire community. As the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. Anthropological research shows that for the most of human history and prehistory, children were probably taken care of by a group of people. The nuclear family, existing only of parents and their children, is a Western invention of the past 1 or 2 centuries. Primatologist Sarah Hirdi even goes so far as to argue that communal child rearing was essential in the development of the deeply interlinked sociality that makes our species unique. For me, these are clear indications that this is a part of our genetic expectation. Integrated care. This brings me to the next point. Communities are caring. What I mean by that is that communities promote care for our neighbor. Communities have, to a large extent, the ability to look after their own members. I observed in the Nepali village how the village children were raised with the support of the community and how the villagers helped each other out in times of need. Historian Yuval Noah Harari writes about pre-industrial villages. The family was also the welfare system, the health system, the education system, the construction industry, the trade union, the pension fund, the insurance company, the radio, the television, the newspapers, the bank, and even the police. When a person fell sick, the family took care of her. When a person grew old, the family supported her, and her children were her pension fund. When a person died, the family took care of the orphans. If a person wanted to build a hut, the family lent a hand. If a person wanted to open a business, the family raised the necessary money. But if a person's illness was too grave for the family to manage, or a new business demanded too large an investment, the local community came to the rescue. In modern society, we tend not to take care of our neighbor as much. Those in need of care are often marginalized. There exists a trend to outsource care. Those that cannot take care of themselves, the young, the old, the sick, and disabled, are often taken care of by professionals in institutions. Nurses, teachers, therapists in nursery homes, hospitals, etc. I do not mean to say that professional care is never needed. The way our society is structured today, it is not easy to find other solutions. We should not underestimate the amount and the quality of care that communities can offer. We cannot just substitute that for institutional care. Compassion is often difficult to provide in institutional care settings, and the lack of compassion has detrimental health effects. The relationship between staff and patients is a professional relationship, and a hierarchical one for that matter. The one in need of help is not on equal footing with the caregiver and tends to be seen in the light of their condition, disability, or other perceived shortcomings. Doctors, nurses, and therapists are trained to see people as problems that need to be fixed. Moreover, even though the staff can definitely be very kind and well-intentioned, they usually perform their services not only out of loving kindness, but also for money. In a community, though, relationships are naturally more loving and caring. In community, one can be seen as an equal and can be loved and accepted as one is. I believe there is something profoundly healing about being accepted the way you are. Community has the power to embrace everyone and make them feel valued. In community, or at least in the communities I envision in this book, you are not your disease or your disability. You are first and foremost a human being and as fully a member of the community as everyone else. That is why older people, for instance, generally prefer to keep living in their community and stay connected. The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities acknowledges the need of disabled people to be included in and receive the necessary support from the community, and the governments worldwide are encouraging community-based rehabilitation programs. Communities are not only well suited for offering care. I believe that offering care makes the community themselves stronger. If we learn how to take care of those that are different or have different needs, it will make us more resilient. If we expose ourselves to life's challenges, supported by the community, we will grow stronger through this experience. We have to open our eyes to the suffering in the world. We should not close ourselves off from those that are differently abled or psychologically challenged. The inclusivity and diversity that communities can offer are a form of wealth. By opening ourselves up to the experience of those who are different, we are enriched by different ways of experiencing the world. We gain a lot of insight and wisdom from seeing the world through other people's eyes. If we live in a protected environment with only similar people, we are simply not facing the reality of our human predicament. We will just stay in our comfort zone, and when challenges come knocking on the door, we will not know how to deal with them. We will be limited in our understanding of how we can be transformed as a species. We can see the same principle at work in nature. Healthy ecosystems are always the ones that are more diverse. Diversity is strength. Natural ecosystems consist of careful balance between dozens, if not hundreds, of species that all take care of each other in different ways. Evolution has fine-tuned these processes over the course of hundreds of thousands of years. In this way, the system is very stable and it is hardly disrupted by pests or even natural disaster. Monocultures, on the other hand, can be wiped out by pests in an instant because they do not have the same resilience that comes with diversity. In order to achieve such resilience, I believe communities should indiscriminately welcome people of all abilities, ages, and walks of life. Even more so, they should make a conscious effort to achieve this diversity. In Sadhana Forest, where I live, everybody who wishes can come and visit or stay with our community for a while. There are no prior requirements. We do not ask people for their resume. We do not even ask them to register ahead of time. In fact, we do not even have a door. Anyone can walk in and will be welcomed. We regularly have groups of disabled children coming to visit, and we support people with psychological difficulties. We are always trying to be more open and bring in more diverse groups of people. Space for work. Another benefit of intentional communities is their different approach to work. What stands out here is, again, that communities can value everyone for who they are and what they do. A good functioning community will try to find good use for everyone. In society, it is the other way around. Organizations look for people to fill up specific spots. They write out a job description and look for someone who fits that description and has the right qualifications. The way I see it, communities should welcome all regardless of their resume. There should be a spot for everyone. A community should look at the personality and capacities of each person and see how they can best contribute to the community. In this way, all are valued equally. The person doing the management is as essential as the one cleaning the toilets or keeping the books. Society looks at how much money you make. Community, on the other hand, should not look at the numbers, but at your values. How you act should matter more than how much you achieve. If you act with integrity and care, people will really appreciate this, even if the result is less visible. In Sadhana Forest, for instance, it does not matter so much who can plant the most trees. Somebody who provides a lot of emotional support and care to others without planting any trees themselves is as valuable as an effective tree planter. In modern society, we can become very disconnected from our work, or using Karl Marx's words, estranged from our work. Since the Industrial Revolution, our jobs have become increasingly specialized. We are often only responsible for small niches in large anonymous networks. This can make it hard for us to see the impact of our work and to become aware of the bigger picture. We just do our job, and after that, we go home, enjoy time off, and dissociate from our work. Author Wendell Berry writes, "A system of specialization requires the abdication to specialists of various competences and responsibilities that were once personal and universal. This supposedly fortunate citizen is therefore left with only two concerns: making money and entertaining himself. He earns money, typically as a specialist, working an 8-hour day at a job for the quality or consequences of which somebody else, or perhaps more typically, nobody else, will be responsible. And not surprisingly, since he can do so little else for himself, he is even unable to entertain himself. For there exists an enormous industry of exorbitantly expensive specialists whose purpose is to entertain him. What happens under the rule of specialization is that, though society becomes more and more intricate, it has less and less structure. It becomes more and more organized, but less and less orderly. The community disintegrates because it loses the necessary understandings, forms, and enactments of the relations among materials and processes, principles and actions, ideals and realities, past and present, present and future, men and women, body and spirit, city and country. Just as the individual character loses the sense of a responsible involvement in these relations. In an intentional community, on the other hand, we are clearly connected to our work and the results are visible. If the chef does not practice proper hygiene, the entire community will get sick. It is hard to distance yourself from your work because everyone around you is directly affected by it. And you cannot just leave your job and go home. You live in that same community, so you have to deal with all the issues your work raises. So, go and find yourself a suitable community. And if you cannot find one that suits you, feel free to start your own. The next chapter will provide you with some guidelines on how to approach that.
This is Orville Radio, Voices from the City of Dawn.